And welcome back to Season 2 of Fertility Talks, the Therapie Fertility podcast. I'm your host, Ranae von Meding, and I'm so excited to be back hosting our second season of this podcast. Each week, I will be sitting down with a different guest and chatting all things fertility. As always, our hope is that through this series, through honest conversation and information, we can strip away some of the stigma that sometimes comes hand in hand with infertility and fertility treatment in Ireland. Today, I have in studio with us Avril Flynn, who is a Dublin-based midwife, childbirth educator, and mum of one. But not only that, she is also one of my very dear friends, and I have been dying to get her onto this podcast, so I'm very excited for today. Welcome, Avril.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
I think the problem with us today is going to be getting us to stop talking.
Yeah, that is. We both love to chat, and we actually met originally on a podcast. So there's a circular loveliness to this.
It is, isn't it? It's it's going to be good. So to introduce you to our viewers and listeners, maybe you could just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a midwife. I got into midwifery a little bit later. I've worked in the area for about 15 years. I obviously look about 12, so, you know, I started when I was like 9 months old. I was like the Doogie Howser of the midwifery world. No, I jest. I also worked as a fertility nurse for about 2 years. And then when I got pregnant with my own son, after some issues, I decided to set up my own practice providing childbirth education, birth support, fertility, I suppose more support in the entire journey. So covering from preconception right the way to, but very importantly for me, as a queer person and as an advocate, that it was to ensure in my practice that people from the entire rainbow family spectrum, the LBGTQI plus spectrum, were at the heart of my practice. So I don't just provide classes for pregnant women, I provide for pregnant people, for straight couples, gay couples, singles from every spectrum, and people from the trans community, non-binary folk, the whole gambit. And that is not something that, as you well know, is still, there is not very inclusive. And I very much want to, I suppose, highlight that and change that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I for sure, like from our own experience of going through fertility treatment, from the supports that were available to us with accessing those services, when it came to choosing a sperm donor, all the nuances around that. Then when it came to actually being pregnant and the services that were available, I always say, I wish I had known you when I was pregnant the first time, because we only met when I was pregnant the second time. But, you know, everyone needs someone like you who, you know, gets it. And, you know.
Yeah, but it's more important than that. There's a heteronormative construct around all of these things. And I don't think people understand that in a lot of heteronormity, there's a big slice of misogyny. So we're not just doing the LBGTQI plus community out of a service. We're actually kind of bolstering up the patriarchy. And midwifery shouldn't be political, but it is. And supporting real choice, women's choice and people's choice, means that you meet people where they are. And it's incumbent on us as professionals to get it out of our heads in assuming that every person we meet is a heteronormative cisgendered woman who has a male partner or husband. That's just not reality. Queer people want to have kids and want to have access to the full gambit of everything, just as much as straight people. And I don't think the straight community get that. I think for a lot of people from the queer community, because they were seen as not being able, in inverted commas, to have families, people assume they didn't want that. And I think that's a crazy assumption to make. all of the research would suggest that there's actually more queer young people that actually want to have a family than straight women. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to, if we're really going to be intersectional in our advocacy, then we need inclusivity, and that needs to be right across the board, and not to shy away from, I suppose people are so afraid of using, the wrong words, that it's okay to make a mistake, but it's the fact that you try.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not okay in this day and age that anyone would access a parenting or fertility service and feel that because of their gender identity or sexuality that they don't deserve the best quality care. And that to me is inherently wrong and is something that I will rail against. And the funny thing about me, I'm a queer woman, but I'm married to the straightest man in the world, and very happily so. But I suppose I'm able to, people assume I'm a heteronormative person, and that's fine. People make assumptions, but that's actually a bit of a superpower, because you get to see what people really think of us, when they think we're not listening. And I find that a really good ability to learn and to educate, and a really safe space to go, well, maybe if you looked at things this way, because that's how I think you move hearts and minds.
Yeah. I guess when you're looking at like the services we're talking about, like it's really basic. It's, it's from going to your GP, it's getting some testing done in a fertility clinic, it's going to antenatal appointments, it's going to a breastfeeding class or a baby feeding class, it's going to pregnancy exercise classes or yoga classes, or like there are so many stops along the way in any sort of like becoming a parent journey, whether that's actually physically going through fertility treatment, conceiving naturally, adopting, surrogacy, whatever that looks like for you to becoming a parent. There are so many services and people and professionals that you come into contact with along the way. And I know every single one of those professionals and services that we encountered along the way saw me and assumed that I was, a straight woman and I had a husband. And every single time I encountered that along the way, it's almost like you have to come out multiple times a day.
Because you have to explain yourself.
And
else you have to just not say anything because you're just too tired.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, sure.
And that to me is just abhorrent. Why is that so? It's such an easy thing, actually. It's not a great mind shift to just not assume.
And how would you kind of, encourage people to do that? Literally
by
just
asking questions and educating yourself. None of these, nobody in the queer community is new. People have been queer, gay, lesbian, bi and trans throughout the millennia. So none of this is new. But as a country and as a society, we've moved quite quickly in one direction by legalizing gay marriage, and that was wonderful. But there is still a huge discrepancy with how, because I married a man, and how Felix and how my maternity experience and how other people's parenting experience, and the shift is not that great to just not assume.
Yeah,
it's literally that simple.
Yeah.
Don't assume, and if you don't know, ask, but in a polite way. It's like the shift when there were no such thing as single mothers, back when, the church had its vice grip on everything, and the inverted shame of that. And it would, people would talk in a similar vein about being a single mother in a maternity ward and feeling that inherent shame because people assumed, and, putting on a fake ring. It's not that different. So I think, compassionate care starts with giving a shit. Excuse my French. Giving a damn. And it's not that hard. You don't have to actually even support to be compassionate and to see that your role as a healthcare professional is to care for everyone where they are.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, just ask.
Yeah.
But in a polite and respectful way. You know, it always makes me scream laughing, the obsession that straight people have with the kind of sexual elements of queer people. They're obsessed with it. Maybe because they should have tried it. No, I jest. But that, you know, every person is just a person with similar hopes and dreams. Everybody wants to be respected and happy. And if you are in a caring profession, it is your absolute job, whatever your own personal belief or whatever is, to just get that people just want to be. It's that simple. And particularly with parenting, because generally, unless you're very lucky in the type of queer relationship you have, you more than likely don't have a uterus and sperm, or you might, but it's more unusual that you would.
Yeah.
You generally might have a lot of sperm or a lot of eggs or two
uteruses.
So for people to make a family, it's a real decision, and there are a lot more hoops to jump through. And therefore, by the time that they actually get, hopefully, to a pregnancy, their journey has been long. And, you know, why would any of us make that more challenging? It blows my mind, you know? And it's not okay to not get it.
Yeah.
Like, just no. You have to not assume, ask. Like, even the way the computer systems are set up in the HSE and in the maternity systems, like, there isn't a space for partner two.
Yeah.
It is mum and dad.
Yeah.
You know, like,
I often think, like, why would it be so hard to just, you know, parent
one and parent two?
Yeah.
And I suppose this subject can be made very complex, but I actually like to break it down. Do you believe in respect? Do you believe that people have a want and a wish to be a parent? How can you support that? How can you support their journey? How can you make that road a little bit easier and a little bit shorter?
Yeah.
That's simple. You don't have to politicize parenthood in that way. And it's not your job. It's not my job as a midwife or as a childbirth educator. It's my job to make sure that people feel supported and cared for, because that is totally lacking in the public system, and that really needs to change.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Like in your work and the couples, and particularly the queer couples that you see, or the queer people that you see, how do you do that? Like do you get people coming to you in the preconception kind of?
Absolutely. And I support people who have gone through adoption, both international and inter-country in Ireland. I've supported people that have gone through all the different types of surrogacy routes. And so I'm generally in touch with people. Sometimes they ring me when, you know, their little person is about to arrive. But the big understanding is that I'm able to give them practical information as to how do you keep a baby alive for 24. But, you know, you don't get taught this stuff in school. And if you are a gay male couple, you can't go to a public antenatal class. Yeah. You're not allowed. Yeah. There's no space for you. There is no public service for you. So where do you find out how to change a nappy and how to feed a baby and how to bath a baby? You know, and just the psychological support of having somebody on the phone, kind of like a big sister that you can ring and ask anything with no judgment. And also that I get it. I understand where you are. And also I'm a hypnobirth practitioner and a mindfulness teacher. So we're able to do lovely connection exercises. And it works with straight couples as well, to get them to really feel like they're about to be a parent, and that they can get in touch with the pregnancy element of it, even if they're not physically pregnant.
Yeah. So the queer couples that come to you, and obviously there are some very obvious ones, you know, with regards to
obvious queer people, the
obvious queer people, as opposed to the like stealth ones. But you know, there's some obvious barriers that people would face when it comes to accessing fertility services, like surrogacy is not allowed at this current point in Ireland. It will be soon, but at the moment it is not. But when it comes to, say, like a same-sex female couple or a female person with a trans male partner, what are the barriers that the couples face when it comes to accessing fertility services?
Well, the first one is financial, which is a big one. We don't provide financial help for that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you actually have to do quite a lot of research to get really good quality information of how stuff works and how stuff is, how it could work and the different choices. You know, you can do reciprocal IVF, which or you can do known donor, you can do unknown donor. And until you go down the rabbit hole, you assume that all of this will have a legal standing. And then to your horror, you find out it doesn't. And so there's a lot of trust as a queer person to be a parent. There's a lot of trust because the road might be long, but also the legal standing isn't guaranteed. And that's a real tough one. And I don't think people understand that. I think I know people assumed when gay marriage came in that people would have an automatic right. And as well, to my abject horror still, that's not the case. And then there's a psychological barrier as well, in that if you're a trans man, whether you're on hormones or not, it can bring up a huge amount of body dysphoria around the pregnancy. And then there's also the judgy heads on people. And as I say to every parent, you don't have to tell people your story unless you want to. And I see you, I respect you, and I know you're going to make a great parent because you want this. And don't you think that that's the biggest thing for parents, to actually really want it?
Yeah,
like no queer person really gets accidentally pregnant.
No.
It's not possible.
No.
You don't, like, it doesn't happen. So it's a real wanted and thought of and saved for thing.
Yeah.
And all of the research, which I love to tell people when I get into the various debates, what every child needs is stability and love. That's it. That is it. Yeah. It is not the family.
Yeah, they don't need two parents. They don't need
kids. Don't actually care.
Yeah, as long as there is a person or a unit
or a person who loves them and makes them a priority. That's a happy kid.
Yeah,
that's it. And all of the research, there's some really good, really high quality research coming out from both psychological and health, that's a fact. And I think that's very important to push, because the rhetoric that some of the right wingers would use is, a kid needs a mom and a dad. Like, will you get away? People have been brought up by their grandparents, by an aunt, by an uncle, by a single parent. That's rot, and the research backs that up. So that's just not true. But for younger queer people, think about your fertility now. Yeah. And I know that sounds really weird, but I suppose because when you come out, your adolescence might be extended a little bit, or your journey to discovering yourself might be a little bit longer, and then all of a sudden you're 45, and then it's a lot more challenging to be a parent. So it is a possibility for you, and if it's something that you want, but do think about it sooner rather than later, as we would advise all people. And I was delighted. I've contributed an article. There's a really brilliant journal called The Student Midwife in the UK, and they're doing for April an LBGTQI plus focused article, which is just really brilliant. Yeah. And I've written an article on it, which is Pathways to Parenthood from an LBGTQI plus, which kind of just in short lists. Yeah. And it was actually really nice compiling the list to see the options. And the big thing is you and I worry about the legalities and fight the corner. But if you want to be a parent, if that's in your heart, go for it.
You can do it, yeah.
You can do it. There's ways and means.
Yeah.
And there is a wonderful community of parents there that have trod the boards for you.
Yeah.
So if it's something that you want, talk about it and ask, but there's a great support network there, and it's lovely. Like there's, when we go to Equality for Children events, it just makes my heart so happy to see so many happy kids and so many success stories, because every single one of those families has had a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have to make much more conscious decisions. And that just absolutely gladdens my heart to see all those little smiley happy faces and the cute babies.
Lots of cute babies.
Oh, so cute babies.
Something you said there, which I think is really important. I think a lot of people, when you are queer and you're going to have to maybe access donor sperm, for example, to grow your family, there's kind of an assumption that there are no pre-existing fertility issues there, because you kind of think
it's just a matter of
bringing
the sperm bank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not the case, just as it is not the case for heterosexual couples who assume they're just going to have unprotected sex and they're going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
So I think it is really important that all people, regardless of what your situation is, what your sexuality is, that you kind of learn about your fertility earlier on, and don't leave it until
and if you know early on that there might be a challenge, you can make different decisions. And like we were talking before we kind of came on air, the really big thing is that the younger you are born, if you're born with a uterus and ovaries, your ovaries begin to age from the moment of conception, which is really
terrifying,
cruel.
Isn't it?
That's so mean.
It's like you haven't even been born yet.
No, but you're born with your entire possibility.
Yeah.
And I love that image actually of when you were in your birth parent and in
we put that on the Therapy Fertility
your granny
we put that on our Instagram a few weeks ago.
So cool.
It's so cool, but it's even cooler because in our case of reciprocal IVF, think about that, okay? So if you think of that image of the granny, the baby, and then the eggs.
Yeah.
So that image is my mother-in-law carrying Audrey, and then in Audrey's ovaries are the eggs that turned into the embryos and the babies that I carried, which is just like, that's insane, right?
It's just brilliant. But if you go in and understand your fertility, like I've said this to you before, why are we not teaching kids at school actual real sexual health and advice?
We're just teaching them how not to get pregnant. No, do you know what? No, I think it definitely is.
There is changing, but it depends on where you go
and what school you go to,
and the ethos of the school. But there is not across the board, and still, they don't teach young gay kids how to have gay sex.
Yeah.
That leads to its own drama, let me tell you. But you have to figure it out. There's no, and that to me is crazy, in the same way that why aren't you taught, if you're thinking of having a family, get your fertility checked before you're 30. Because then you might need to speed up your life plan if it's something that you want.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing more painful than if it's something that you really, really want. And unfortunately, because time is the cruelest of mistresses, you've timed out. Like, that's awful.
Yeah.
But yet there are still other possibilities. But again, there's financial strain on that. And when gay men go down the surrogacy route, that can be very complicated because it's not legally allowed in Ireland. So generally they have to go to either Canada, America, because you have to be able to adopt, basically, to be able to fly back, which is very challenging. And that's what I would love people listening to the podcast to just understand, what a journey people have been on. And not assume that people just don't want a family. You just don't know. It seems like people commenting on, when are you having another?
For sure. For straight couples or seemingly straight couples, and if you have one kid, you get asked, and you get asked this all the time.
Yes.
When is your next? And you don't know what journey that family has been on.
And I mean, that's something like I can't have any more babies, and I used to just say, one and done, as a protective measure, because it was just too painful to actually go, well, I can't, I'm me poor old bits have given up the ghost. But at least he's cute. My one little person is cute.
He is cute, and you have a fur baby.
Oh, I do. I have Finn, the fur baby, and it's his birthday in 2 days.
Oh wow!
So you have to come over for a bit of cake for
for sure. One thing I wanted to talk about is using donor sperm, because a lot of the female couples that are coming to therapy are asking like how and people go down this rabbit hole of like I need to pick the perfect donor. What is your experience with parents who use either donor sperm, donor eggs?
Obviously have really good looking kids.
We do,
but you do.
But to be fair, I think most of the good looks come from my wife's side.
So the girls are the image.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So what's your experience of?
So it's very much about. So generally speaking, people either want a familial resemblance, and you can go. So when you go, there are different clinics, and there are different kind of levels of. So for example, you can buy a load of straws, so a load of particular samples, so that if you and your partner who also has a uterus, you could have the same male parent, so that they would have that kids.
There would be that genetic connection.
Or you can do reciprocal IVF, or there are different settings. But in choosing a donor, sometimes people can be a little bit too prescriptive. And ultimately, if the donor is healthy, like genetics are funny. So, what I always advise is always go for the healthy donor.
Yeah.
And also make sure that wherever you're getting it has good and strict policies with regards, that there isn't 50 other people in Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, for example, the sperm bank that we work with is European Sperm Bank, and they have a cutoff point of 3 families.
And they have
very strict. It's very strict.
Yeah. And they have very strict health, but you see, people read, a magazine, and it has some like
you hear these
weirdo tried to impregnate 60 people. And
well, this actually happened. I'm not lying.
I know.
Was it? I'm just pulling this out of the air, but I think it was like the Netherlands, or it was somewhere. And there was a fertility doctor who ran a clinic and used his own sperm.
Yeah.
As like the donor sperm.
And do you know how it came out?
How?
Genetic testing.
And they all kind of linked back to this one
clinic.
Yeah,
so 23andMe is discovering so many family secrets. You have 27 half siblings. What?
That's insane. We do not endorse that.
No, please, absolutely no.
It's terrible.
And that's what you need to go to, a good quality clinic that understands. So some clinics, some Irish clinics, don't have any support or facilities for the queer community. They won't say that outright, but they don't. So go to a clinic that is going to support you and that you're going to feel comfortable in.
That was actually one of the questions I had for you is how important is it to choose care providers who are inclusive and have a really deep understanding of the nuances of the LGBTQ community.
Pregnancy and fertility are stressful enough. You need to be with people that support you on your journey, that again, you don't have to come out every time you go for an appointment, or that ask really irrelevant and very personal questions because they're nosy. So there are some brilliant practitioners and there's some brilliant info, but ask people who have gone down the path. Rather than assume
what their experience was, where they would recommend.
Exactly. And like that, sometimes people will prefer a particular care provider. Sometimes people prefer, and you'll know by talking to people what their actual experience is, because it can be profoundly distressing. When you go to somewhere and your hopes are up and actually you get a big bag of homophobia. So not only are you coming out, without a lot of supportive information, but you've had to be hurt on a level that is irrelevant to your parenting journey. So don't allow yourself, for that to happen. Go to somewhere that people have been to and have had a good experience.
Yeah. Okay, finally, to finish up.
Oh, that's flown.
I know. What advice would you give to anyone who is preparing to start their family through some form of fertility treatment?
Yeah, just to go for it, and to make sure that not to hide it. We all need support. There is no shame. So many people go through this silently, and I hate the thought of that. For queer people in particular, there are some really good resources, like Equality for Children, but just peer support, it's lovely. It's a real family. But there's the Queer Birth Club, a wonderful advocate, AJ Silver. Follow people like Freddie McConnell, who is Seahorse dad, who is just an amazing man, who has just had his second little person, but had a very challenging birth story on his second little person, which I'm still trying to process. There's also wonderful midwife Laura Henry, and they are actually editor of the Student Midwife. So I know that they have, not that they would admit it because they are the most gorgeous person, but they would never give themselves credit. But, people like Laura are changing the lexicon around birth to be more inclusive. And that's why I love that the Student Midwife is coming out with that. And with regards to fertility, there's always hope. There's always hope. And, if you have the support on your journey, just don't go down the road on your own. Have somebody holding you up and holding your hand, because it's lonely enough. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it is wonderful to have this resource for people to listen to and get real information.
Yeah. Well, I think you're awesome as well. And, the support that you provide. I love you. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Fertility Talks, the Therapy Fertility podcast. If you have, please rate, review, and subscribe. For more information on the services we offer, you can visit www.therapyfertility.com.